So the first lesson is from the book of Genesis, chapter 37, verses 1 through 11. Jacob settled in the land where his father had lived as an alien, the land of Canaan. This is the story of the family of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of the other of his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he had made him a long robe with sleeves. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Once Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream that I dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Suddenly, my sheaf rose and stood upright, and your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." And his brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more because of his dreams and his words. He had another dream, and he told it to his brothers, saying, "Look, I have had another dream. The sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What kind of dream is that you have had? Shall we indeed come, I, your mother, and your brothers, and bow to the ground before you?" So his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. The New Testament reading is from the Gospel according to Luke, chapter 15, verses 1 through 7. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus, and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus told them this parable. "Which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders and rejoices. And when he comes home, he calls together friends and neighbors, saying to them, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost.' Just so I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance." Here ends the reading. So I'm currently reading a book called Red Leviathan, The Secret History of Soviet Whaling. And as the title implies, it's a book about the history of the whaling industry in the Soviet Union. And if you're like, wow, that's a weird thing to read, I've actually found it super interesting. It's like a fun mix of Cold War intrigue, economics, marine science, and like the history of the environmental movement. And I'm a little over halfway through, and I've learned many things. Now, in school, we learned a lot about like 19th century whaling, or whaling in the age of sail, like was done with the ships in Mystic Seaport. But I never really thought about what happened with whaling once we hit the Industrial Revolution and didn't need like whale oil for lamps anymore. And it turns out there was a ton of whaling in the 20th century. And one of the interesting features about whaling in the 20th century is that this was a period where people were finally aware that the whale population was becoming endangered. And all the whaling countries of the world, including the Soviet Union, signed many international accords to set catch quotas to try and catch whales sustainably and preserve the population. It was one of the great moments of agreement during the Cold War between the West and the Eastern Bloc. However, the Soviet whaling industry almost immediately began to circumvent the rules they agreed to. They caught whales out of season, caught whales that were too small, and caught thousands and thousands more whales than their agreed-upon quota. And this overfishing pushed the whale population to the brink of extinction, which doomed the whaling industry as a whole. Now, there's more to the story about why the Soviets took such risks, but generally the way the Soviets approached whaling is a picture-perfect illustration of something called the tragedy of the commons. Now, the commons is a term used when like a group of people hold a resource in common where anyone can use it and no one particularly owns it. Think of something like common grazing land or common agricultural land, which would have been what the green was for, outside, or fisheries located outside a country's territorial waters. So the best way to act when you're sharing a common resource is to act with consideration towards others and only use it so there's enough for other people. However, the tragedy part of the tragedy of the commons is that what human beings usually do is act in their own self-interest and take as much of that common resource for themselves as they can, overgrazing, overfishing, resulting in the destruction of the resource. When a resource is limited, people fear there won't be enough to go around, and they take more than their fair share, which ensures there isn't enough for anyone. It's related to the same sort of psychology and behavior that caused people to hoard toilet paper and Clorox wipes when the pandemic began. When we fear a resource is scarce, human beings often turn to looking out for ourselves, which usually hurts everyone else. So today we're starting off a sermon series on Joseph, and the resource that Joseph and his brothers are fighting over at the beginning part of this story is their father Jacob's love. Jacob is sometimes called Israel, and he's the grandson of Abraham. And he settles in the land of Canaan, which is later called Israel. And Jacob has 12 sons with his 2 wives and 2 concubines. So these 12 sons go on to be the heads of each of the 12 tribes of Israel. And Jacob's second youngest son is Joseph, and he's the son of Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel. And Joseph was Jacob's favorite son, which ended up causing a lot of tension in this complicated family unit. So we meet Joseph when he's 17 and helping some of his older brothers with shepherding the flocks. And Joseph brings back a bad report about his brothers to his father. Now, we don't know exactly what Joseph said about his brothers and whether it was justified, but all of us know that a tattletale is never popular. And Joseph's popularity with his brothers is further decreased by Jacob making his favoritism of Joseph very known. Jacob gives Joseph a coat, which only serves to increase the brothers' jealousy. Now, the traditional English translation reads Joseph was given a coat of many colors, which comes from the classic Latin and Greek translations of the Hebrew Old Testament. However, despite that translation inspiring lots of cool art, it's probably not what the word means. The issue for translators is the word describing the coat only appears there and in one other place in Scripture, so we don't have a lot of context clues to figure out what it means. So scholars have had to take some educated shots in the dark. So in addition to coat of many colors, some options out there are coat with long sleeves, coat made from long panels of different fabrics sewn together, or coat with ornamental applique. So we really don't know. But what we do know is that this was a luxury coat that was very fancy, and Joseph being given such a lavish gift made his brothers extremely jealous. The coat is a symbol of how much Jacob favors and loves Joseph more than all of them. So on top of being a snitch and being gifted this fancy coat, Joseph also has these dreams. And these dreams all seem to be about Joseph being in charge of all his brothers and them bowing down to them. So Joseph takes every opportunity to tell his brothers about these dreams of him being in charge, which then causes his brothers to hate him even more. And upon hearing one of these dreams, even Jacob is like, "Joseph, son, tone it down." So as the story unfolds over the coming weeks, we'll understand more and more what Joseph's dreams mean. But for now, we're going to focus on these family dynamics here. Joseph's brothers hate him. And next week, we'll see that they hate him enough to consider murdering him, but then they settle for selling Joseph into slavery. So we've got some very strong emotions going on here, and no one in this part of the story is a hero. Joseph is a spoiled snitch who brags about his dreams of being in charge of everyone, not really going to win friends and influence people there. Jacob supercharges the already awkward dynamics of his family by clearly showing everyone he loves Joseph more than all his other kids, which is not a good parenting choice. And then you've got the brothers who are so green with envy over Joseph receiving all their father's love that they're willing to consider murder. Now, obviously, considering fratricide, considering murdering your brother is the worst in this list here, but this is a hot mess of a family in general, and Joseph is doing himself absolutely no favors. So the first piece of good news for us is about family. Now, often our culture puts a lot of pressure on people to have the perfect family that looks a particular way and never has any problems and lives like, I don't know, like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting. But families are made up of people, and people, real live people, are not perfect. People even aren't perfect in the Bible, and in the case of Jacob's family, well, they take sibling rivalry to the extreme. It's important for us to remember that families come in all shapes and sizes, and with so many good and sometimes bad dynamics. We don't need to feel bad when we don't match up with the so-called perfect family picture. In fact, having a family that's a bit messy and complicated is the main depiction of families in Scripture. Being human and living with and loving other people sometimes means things get messy. And God loves all these dysfunctional families in the Bible, and so God certainly loves our families too, however they might be. But for clarification, in case anyone was wondering, you should not plot to murder your siblings. God is not a fan of that, so don't get any ideas out there. So another important aspect of this story is that God isn't named. It doesn't mention God at all. We don't have God showing up and talking to people here, and that's a lot like our lives. Most of the time, we don't have a clear billboard sign of exactly what God is up to. And it's only after the fact, when we've gotten perspective, that often we can see how God was working at a particular moment. And it's only at the end of the Joseph story where we'll see how God has been working in the story. And it's only at that point that Joseph and everyone then will realize how God has been working in their lives. So this is just a reminder that God is at work in the everyday moments of our lives, even if we can't see it. Sometimes it takes some time to figure things out. And even people in the Bible experience this aspect of faith. Just because we can't see God doesn't mean God isn't up to something. Now, the main source of conflict between Joseph and his brothers is that Joseph is Jacob's favorite. He gets more of his father's love than his brothers, and they feel like there isn't enough of their father's love for them. So this isn't an ideal parenting outcome or a recipe for a peaceful family. And as we'll see next week, Joseph's brothers conspire to get rid of him, likely in hopes that their father will finally notice them and they'll get more of Jacob's love. Jacob's love and attention seem scarce, and the brothers go to extremes to get what they think is their fair share. Now, one of the things people don't seem to understand about Jesus' preaching was that he was preaching God's love. Unlike Jacob's love, Jesus was preaching that God's love is an unlimited resource. So in the gospel lesson, we're told the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So being upset that Jesus is spending his time with sinners, tax collectors, prostitutes, and other misfits reflects a misconception that there isn't enough of God's love to go around. That a sinner receiving mercy means there's less love for the more upstanding citizens of the world. On some level, the Pharisees and the scribes are jealous of the love shown to people they feel deserve it less than them. And that's a very human way to feel. I've certainly felt jealousy when friends or colleagues have gotten recognition I feel I should have gotten. And if I'm honest with all of you, were I in charge of things, some people certainly seem less deserving of grace and love than others, and I imagine some of you have felt that way at times. However, the good news is that none of us get what we deserve. And when we're talking about God's love and grace, we're dealing with resources that can't run out. God's love can't be overused. It can't be depleted. Grace and love for one sinner doesn't mean there's any less for everyone else. In fact, grace has a way of multiplying far beyond what we imagine is possible. And it's good news for us that God is willing to strike out and find the lost sheep of the world, but because we all sometimes get lost, and we need some extra help and love to find our way home. So as we go through the Joseph story this summer, we'll see how God works through this messy family and ensures that these misguided lost sheep don't stay lost, but are reconciled and brought home to the fold. Amen.